about the simple dictionary meaning of the word budget. A budget is an estimate of income and expenditure for a specified period of time. That's all it is. In short, a budget is by definition boring. Why then in India do we wait for the budget with bated breath every year? Simply because over time, this simple exercise of the union budget has been hijacked and perverted into a platform for policy announcements, tax changes, pandering to certain populist tendencies, especially when there are elections round the corner. And that is why the late industrialist Aditya Birla said, I do business in 6 countries, but it is only in India that I have to worry about the budget. When we look at the budget, therefore, let me start with focusing on that very dictionary meaning, a simple estimate of income and expenditure. And let us begin by analyzing the finances of the government. And when we talk about analyzing the finances of the government, there are 2 very important measures that will help in our analysis. And you don't have to be a student of finance or economics to understand the essence of these 2 concepts. They are simple, and I will also try to make them as simple as possible. The 2 measures are the gross domestic product and the gross fiscal deficit. Let's go to the gross domestic product first. The best definition that I have come across of this concept is that the GDP is the total market value of finished goods and services produced in the country in a given year, plus the income of local residents from investments made abroad, minus the income earned by foreigners from the domestic market. The total market value of goods and services in this country that are completed. And if people are sitting in India, we are destroying the environment steadily and leaving a much poorer world for the generations that are coming to us. This cartoon from the United States, very much applicable even to India. Are we going to leave this kind of a huge mountain of debt to the generations that come after us? We can only hope that COVID-19 notwithstanding, the government will be fiscally responsible, slowly and steadily work on lowering the fiscal deficit until it comes to within the desired parameters of 3% of GDP. What is one possible unpleasant fallout from mismanaging GDP? The government's massive borrowing program is likely to crowd out the private sector, even though the finance minister spoke about crowding in the private sector investment in a budget speech. When there is a need for money, both the public sector, that's the government, and the private sector compete for the available monetary pool. When there is a competition for money between the government and private people, no prizes for guessing who's going to win. What will be the fallout? The fallout is not that you will not get money, but that money is going to be increasingly costly. Interest rates could rise, and those could lead to higher inflation. And that has got its own nasty fallout in poor economic performance, etc. So, this I understand is a business forum. So business people would be well advised to re-strategize their strategies for the next year, one of the primary things that you will have to look at is either fix your interest rates on the debts on your borrowings, fix them at a fixed rate, not a floating rate, because interest rates are likely to go up, or better still, try to run your businesses with less debts, try to get rid of debt if possible, try to control debt, because I'm afraid that in the next year we are going to see a lot of turbulence on the interest rate front. The second measure is the gross fiscal deficit, or just the fiscal deficit. And the fiscal deficit is simply the extent to which the government has to borrow to meet its expenditure after it has exhausted its income streams. When all the incomes mainly from various kinds of taxes are insufficient for me to meet my expenses, I meet those expenses by the very imprudent measure of borrowings. The fiscal deficit is always expressed as a percentage of GDP. Most economists would agree that for a country like India, it would be healthy to have a fiscal deficit of 3% of GDP or lower. So keeping that figure of what is healthy in mind, if we are to examine the fiscal deficit, in 2020-21, these are not estimates, these are the actual figures. This was the rather frightening, scary figure of fiscal deficit, 18,291 crores. This was the borrowing of the government to meet its expenditure, 9.2% of GDP. The sharp increase from earlier, once again because of the COVID pandemic. When the 2021 budget was presented, the BE that you see there is budget estimates. 1 year back, when the same finance minister presented her budget, she estimated that we will make some kind of a recovery, and instead of 9.2%, we will be lowering the fiscal deficit to 6.8% of the GDP. This estimate was made a year back. Now, in the year that has passed, figures have been collected for at least 9 months of this particular financial year of 2021-22, and the actual fiscal deficit, RE is the revised estimates for the same year. It's not far from what was predicted earlier, which means a reasonably good job has been done of maintaining the fiscal deficit at the projected value of a year ago. And when we come to this year's budget, which is trying to forecast